In action films, the finale is supposed to be the moment where everything comes together. The explosion of tension, the final twist, the payoff, the entire story has been building toward. But what if the ending you saw wasn't the true ending? What if the conclusion originally crafted by the writers and director was quietly replaced, reshaped, or completely overturned, because the star at the center of the movie demanded it? During the peak era of action cinema, the late 80s through the early 2000s, several leading men wielded enough influence to alter not just their characters, but the trajectory of entire stories. Some refused to let their characters suffer defeat. Others rejected endings that hinted at vulnerability, moral conflict, or emotional weakness. There were actors who insisted that a planned twist be erased simply because it didn't align with their heroic public image. In some cases, entire sequences were reshot. Scripts were hastily rewritten and the tone of the film was shifted, all because the star believed the original ending didn't match the identity they had spent years cultivating. As a result, many action films arrived in theaters stripped of the darker, more complex conclusions they were built to deliver. Hidden endings included tragic sacrifices, unresolved mysteries, and morally challenging outcomes that would have changed the audience's understanding of the characters forever. But those versions never saw the light of day. Instead, the final cuts were molded around the preferences, insecurities, or branding decisions of the lead actor. Today, we're revealing those endings, the ones that were rewritten not for narrative clarity or studio intervention, but because the star wanted a different fate. These are 15 action movies where the lead actor changed the ending, reshaping climaxes, altering character arcs, and leaving behind a trail of what might have been moments the audience was never meant to witness. Fact 1. Marked for Death, 90. When Marked for Death was originally outlined, the filmmakers intended its conclusion to carry a far heavier emotional blow. John Hatcher was meant to win the physical conflict, but emerge visibly damaged, a man forced to face the emotional weight of everything he had done. The script portrayed him as someone who had finally reached the breaking point after years of violence, leaving the audience with a lingering sense of unease rather than triumph. It was a sobering, grounded finale, designed to challenge the myth of the flawless action hero. Steven Seagal stopped that version from ever being filmed. At that point in his career, Seagal's screen identity was inseparable from the idea of impenetrable strength. Vulnerability, self-doubt, or emotional collapse had no place in the characters he wanted to portray. According to those who worked on the film, Seagal pushed back hard against any suggestion that Hatcher might seem weakened mentally or spiritually by the events of the story. The notion of the character grappling with regret clashed directly with his established persona, so the ending was revised. Every moment that hinted at Hatcher's internal struggle was stripped away. Any sign of lingering trauma vanished from the final cut. The replacement ending presents Hatcher as unfazed, victorious, and mentally untouched, a man who walks away from danger without carrying any scars. The finished film bears almost no trace of what the writers had intended. The moral ambiguity and emotional consequences, once central to the story, were removed in favor of a clean, crowd-pleasing victory crafted to safeguard the star's image. Fact 2. The Glimmer Man, 1996. The original ending for The Glimmer Man was meant to bring Jack Cole full circle, forcing him to confront the darker instincts he had tried so hard to suppress. In the earliest drafts, the villain's death served as a symbolic moment, where Cole accepts the reality of who he used to be. It was a raw, introspective close to the film, designed to show how redemption often comes with painful compromise. But Steven Seagal refused to let the character take that step. By the time production began, Seagal had fully embraced a spiritual, almost monk-like approach to his roles. The idea of Cole killing the antagonist outright contradicted the image he wanted to project: a man who chooses understanding over violence, even when provoked. Crew members later confirmed that Seagal pressed for a finale that reflected restraint instead of execution. This demand forced the creative team to dismantle the emotional engine of the original ending. The brutal confrontation was softened into something far more subdued. Cole doesn't deliver justice. Instead, he demonstrates mercy, not because the story demanded it, but because the actor insisted on aligning the character with his personal ideology. The resulting ending feels oddly detached from the narrative that builds toward it. What began as a journey through guilt and inner conflict ends with a quiet moment that was never meant to define the character. The emotional closing note was rewritten not to serve the story, but to reshape an image. Fact 3. Fire Down Below, 97. Early drafts of Fire Down Below ended on one of the darkest notes in Steven Seagal's 90s filmography. The story originally concluded with Jack Taggart facing an emotional collapse after witnessing how deeply corruption and environmental devastation had poisoned the community he was trying to save. The tone of the ending was bleak and heavy. One version even allowed an unspoken suggestion that Taggart was so overwhelmed by hopelessness that he might choose self-destruction. It was a daring, somber finale, meant to highlight the cost of confronting insurmountable evil. Seagal immediately rejected the entire direction. He was adamant that Taggart could not appear defeated physically, mentally, or spiritually. Reports from production indicate that Seagal demanded any implication of despair be removed from the film. The hero needed to stand firm no matter how dire the circumstances. A tragic or ambiguous ending simply didn't align with the persona he had built throughout the decade. The final act was rewritten from the ground up. Scenes meant to reveal Taggart's emotional breaking point were eliminated. The original atmosphere of hopelessness was replaced with a clear, optimistic resolution in which justice prevails and the villainy is decisively exposed. Taggart emerges steady and composed, untouched by the crushing reality the writers had intended him to face. The ending that reached audiences was dramatically different from the one envisioned by the filmmakers, reshaped not by story logic, but by a star unwilling to portray fragility. Fact 4. Showdown in Little Tokyo, 1991. The earliest version of Showdown in Little Tokyo contained a twist designed to shock the audience and redefine who Chris Kenner truly was. In the initial script, Kenner wasn't the flawless warrior viewers know he had a buried stain in his past. The plan was to reveal that, long before his crusade against the Yakuza, Kenner had cooperated with them under duress. This revelation was meant to erupt in the final act, turning the climax into a collision between guilt, history, and revenge. The film was poised to explore a more conflicted, morally tangled hero. Dolph Lundgren rejected the idea almost instantly. Throughout his career, Lundgren often portrayed characters built on unwavering discipline and integrity. Playing a protagonist with a history of collaboration, even a reluctant one, was something he believed would undercut Kenner's strength and clarity. According to people who worked on the movie, Lundgren made it clear that audiences needed a hero whose morality wasn't compromised, and he pushed to remove the twist altogether. The creative team had no choice but to restructure the story. All references to Kenner's secret past were removed. Instead, the narrative shifted toward a simpler revenge arc rooted in trauma and righteous anger. The final confrontation, once meant to be a moment of emotional reckoning, became a straightforward showdown between good and evil. In the end, the film lost the psychological complexity originally intended. What could have been a layered, introspective finale was replaced with a cleaner, more conventional hero vs. villain resolution, shaped entirely by the star's insistence on maintaining a pure, heroic identity. Fact 5. The Patriot, 1998. Before The Patriot reached audiences, its conclusion carried a weight far heavier than the polished ending that made the final cut. In the initial script, Dr. Wesley McLaren faces an epidemic that spirals beyond his ability to contain it. Though he fights tirelessly, the original ending saw him standing among the wreckage of what remained, a man who had done everything he could, yet failed to save those closest to him. It was a sober reflection of the limits of heroism, meant to ground the film in a sphere of emotional realism. Steven Seagal pushed firmly against that direction. By the late '90s, Seagal had become increasingly protective of his cinematic persona, calm, centered, and spiritually unbreakable. A final scene depicting McLaren crushed by grief clashed with that image. Reports from production reveal that Seagal was adamant the film conclude with resilience and renewed hope rather than emotional devastation. As a result, the ending was rewritten to uplift rather than unsettle. Scenes portraying McLaren's anguish were removed or softened. Instead of standing amid loss, he emerges as a pillar of strength, guiding the community toward recovery. The final moments of the film emphasize healing stability and moral certainty, replacing the somber tone the writers first envisioned. The rewrite dramatically shifted the emotional message of the story. What started as a grounded tale of sacrifice and consequence became a reaffirmation of Seagal's preferred on-screen identity, a man who stands tall regardless of the destruction around him. Fact 6. On Deadly Ground, 1994. The first drafts of On Deadly Ground aimed to confront audiences with an uncomfortable truth that one man, no matter how skilled or determined, cannot always stop the machinery of corporate destruction. The planned ending depicted Forrest Taft fighting valiantly, but ultimately failing to prevent catastrophic environmental damage caused by the villain's operations. It was a bleak but powerful message, one that grounded the film in realism and emphasized the severity of ecological collapse. But Steven Seagal had a vastly different vision. During this period, Seagal was heavily shaping his characters around spiritual authority and moral clarity. Allowing Taft to lose contradicted everything he wanted the role to represent. According to accounts from the set, Seagal insisted that the finale not only show Taft triumphing, but also include a moment where he delivers a public message about environmental responsibility. His character wasn't just meant to win, he was meant to teach. The result was a complete overhaul of the final act. The original tragic ending was removed. Instead, Taft dismantles the villain's operation with overwhelming success and walks away as an almost prophetic figure. The now infamous speech sequence replaced the original closing beat, transforming the film from a sobering drama into something closer to a moral lecture. The rewritten ending dramatically altered the movie's tone and thematic impact. What could have been a grounded commentary on ecological struggle became an idealized victory, crafted to match the star's evolving self-image. Fact 7. Hard Target, 1993. Before Hard Target became the kinetic action ride, it's known for John Woo envisioned a finale that carried a somber, emotional undercurrent. In his earliest outline, Chance Boudreaux survives the final clash. But the experience leaves him deeply shaken, a man scarred by the violence he couldn't prevent. Woo wanted the audience to feel the cost, the emotional weight, the regret, and the lasting trauma that so often accompany the brutal roles his heroes are forced to play. It was a signature Woo-style conclusion echoing themes of sacrifice and inner turmoil. Jean-Claude Van Damme had a very different interpretation of who Chance should be. At the peak of his international fame, Van Damme maintained tight control over how his characters were perceived. He believed Chance should leave the story as a victorious, unbroken figure, someone who doesn't crumble under pressure or dwell on darker emotions. According to individuals present during production, Van Damme insisted on stripping the finale of its melancholy tone, pushing for a more celebratory ending that played into his established screen identity. The creative team adjusted accordingly. Scenes emphasizing emotional fallout or moral consequence were minimized. Instead of wrestling with guilt or sorrow, Chance emerges confident and composed, dispatching the villains with style and finishing the journey without visible emotional scars. The final version of the film still delivers Woo's trademark action, but the introspective weight intended for the character dissolves. What could have been a layered, haunting finale was re-engineered into a clean triumph, a choice made not for narrative depth, but for star image management. Fact 8. Death Warrant, 1990. The original plan for Death Warrant aimed for a conclusion that left viewers unsettled. In early drafts, Detective Louis Burke escapes the horrors of the prison, but the system's corruption remains intact. The intended ending suggested that despite Burke's determination, the deeper conspiracy continues untouched. a reminder that some evils are too entrenched to defeat with a single act. The tone was bleak and unsettling, emphasizing the futility of trying to fix a broken institution. Jean-Claude Van Damme refused to let the story close on that note. Van Damme was committed to maintaining the image of an action hero who delivers absolute justice. A finale that left criminals undefeated didn't sit well with him. Those connected to the production later explained that Van Damme insisted the ending be reshaped into something triumphant, where the mastermind behind the conspiracy is decisively eliminated and Burke emerges as a fully victorious figure. This demand led to significant rewrites. Instead of exposing a system too corrupt to break, the story shifts focus to a single villain who Burke can confront and defeat. Any hints that the rot ran deeper were removed. Scenes that once showed Burke grappling with moral uncertainty were discarded. What remains is an ending tailored to uphold Van Damme's preferred on-screen image. A hero who overcomes every obstacle, brings down every enemy, and walks away with complete clarity. No ambiguity. No lingering threats, no emotional shadows. Fact 9. Maximum Risk, 1996. The earliest vision for Maximum Risk leaned heavily into emotional disorientation and psychological trauma. Alain Moreau, after uncovering the truth about his brother's secret life, was originally meant to end the film shaken to his core. The planned finale left his physical survival intact, but his emotional state fractured, unsure whether justice had truly been served or whether he had simply inherited his brother's ghosts. The story was conceived as a meditation on identity and loss, ending with ambiguity rather than triumph. Jean-Claude Van Damme disagreed with the tone. According to those involved in the project, Van Damme felt strongly that Alain should close the film, not as a man drowning in grief, but as a hero who rises above the pain. A vulnerable, psychologically shaken protagonist didn't fit with the powerful, composed image Van Damme had crafted throughout the 90s. He called for the ending to be reshaped into something more decisive and empowering. The finale was rewritten to reflect this. Scenes meant to show Alain confronting emotional breakdown were heavily reduced or removed entirely. The action in the final confrontation was intensified, reframing Alain as a resolute figure who dismantles the threat with confidence. Instead of limping into uncertainty, he walks out with renewed direction. As a result, the story's original emotional complexity gave way to a more familiar action hero send-off, one tailored to align with the star's preferences rather than the film's initial narrative ambition. Fact 10. Lethal Weapon 4, 1998. When the early story outlines for Lethal Weapon 4 were assembled, the filmmakers originally aimed for a closing chapter that confronted the harsh reality of aging heroes. One draft ended with a devastating blow. Either Riggs or Murtaugh suffers a life-changing injury, or worse, during the final confrontation with the Triads. The intention was to show that years of danger had finally caught up to them, that even the most iconic partners couldn't outrun consequences forever. But Mel Gibson and Danny Glover steered the story in another direction. The two stars who had embodied Riggs and Murtaugh for more than a decade were deeply protective of the partnership they'd built on screen. Gibson reportedly felt Riggs deserved a hopeful resolution to balance the character's long struggle with trauma. Glover favored a conclusion that strengthened the film's family-centered themes, celebrating unity rather than emphasizing loss. Their combined influence reshaped the entire finale. Scenes implying fatal consequences or long-term damage were removed, replaced with a warmer, safer interpretation of the climax. Instead of a grim hospital sequence filled with grief, the ending pivoted toward laughter, reconciliation, and a reaffirmation of the family the characters had formed. The final cut became a comforting send-off. Not because the story demanded it, but because its two leads insisted the saga end on emotional uplift instead of tragedy. Fact 11. Tango and Cash, 1989. In its early conception, Tango and Cash was poised to end like a gritty neo-noir thriller. Ray Tango and Gabe Cash were initially set to uncover a criminal organization so deeply embedded that even killing the main villain wouldn't stop it. The planned finale left the heroes victorious, but troubled knowing the corruption they fought still thrived. It was a darker, more cynical exit, entirely in line with the hard-edged crime films of the late 80s. But Sylvester Stallone and Kurt Russell had other plans. Stallone, known for retooling scripts to suit his on-screen persona, reportedly pushed for a cleaner, more euphoric ending. Russell backed a lighter tone as well, wanting the finale to highlight their chemistry and the film's more playful energy. Together, they pressed for a version that abandoned the bleakness in favor of an upbeat final blow. The rewrite removed ambiguity and moral tension. Villains who once might have escaped justice were instead dispatched definitively. The ending became a stylish victory complete with explosive action and witty banter. Any traces of the original noir-inspired bleakness were trimmed away, replaced by a celebration of teamwork and charisma. The shift transformed the film's tone, turning a morally complex finale into a crowd-pleasing, star-driven triumph. Fact 12. Sudden Death, 1995. The initial ending for Sudden Death confronted the traumatic aftermath of surviving mass violence. In its original form, Darren McCord emerges from the arena bruised, guilt-ridden, and emotionally shaken after failing to save everyone caught in the terrorist attack. The script's final image showed him alone in the ruins, struggling to process the lives lost despite his efforts, a stark reminder of the limits of heroism. Jean-Claude Van Damme rejected that tone outright. Van Damme had spent years building a brand centered on heroes who endure with unwavering resolve. A finale depicting McCord crushed by trauma conflicted with that image. According to individuals tied to the project, Van Damme insisted that the ending reflect resilience rather than emotional collapse. McCord needed to survive the ordeal not just physically, but morally intact. The rewrites were extensive. Scenes emphasizing casualties or depicting McCord's psychological fallout were stripped away. His intended moment of despair was cut entirely. Instead, the final version reinforces McCord's competence and determination, leading to a clean victory in which he rescues his children and restores order. The closing moments no longer explore the emotional cost of violence. They simply affirm the hero's strength, reshaped to protect the star's preferred portrayal. Fact 13. The Expendables 2010. In its earliest screenplay drafts, The Expendables was meant to close with a jarring emotional blow that contrasted sharply with the film's explosive macho energy. One of the original concepts included the death of a beloved team member during the final mission, a sacrifice intended to emphasize the brutal nature of mercenary work and to ground the story with genuine emotional stakes. It was a bold choice designed to show that even elite warriors are not immune to loss. But Sylvester Stallone, along with several members of the cast, didn't want the film to go in that direction. As both the director and the anchor of the ensemble, Stallone envisioned the movie as a celebration of unity and brotherhood, rather than a meditation on sacrifice. Insiders later revealed that Stallone believed killing a team member in the first film would fracture the sense of camaraderie that defined the group. Several cast members reportedly agreed, wanting the team's image to feel strong, complete, and unbroken. The script was reworked accordingly. The planned death scene was removed, and the ending was rewritten into a clean victory, where the entire squad returns home intact. The finale highlights teamwork, loyalty, and the joy of surviving impossible odds, capped off with a celebratory gathering that emphasizes their bond. The final version is far more optimistic than what was originally conceived, shaped less by narrative tension and more by the collective preferences of its star-studded ensemble. Fact 14. Universal Soldier: The Return, 99. The initial vision for Universal Soldier: The Return reached for a darker, introspective tone. Luke Devereaux's story was intended to end with him barely surviving his confrontation with SETH, physically broken and emotionally devastated by the realization that he would never fully escape the shadow of his past. The original conclusion was somber and reflective, a fitting continuation of the franchise's grim exploration of identity and humanity. Jean-Claude Van Damme pushed for a different path. By the late 1970s, Van Damme was shifting away from roles that left his characters tormented or psychologically fractured. He wanted Devereaux to stand as a figure of victory and purpose, not as a tragic experiment struggling with existential despair. Those close to the production say that Van Damme insisted the ending be reshaped to present Devereaux as a triumphant hero, not a wounded soul wrestling with the aftermath of violence. Because of this, the final act underwent major changes. The emotional fallout written into the original script was stripped away. The bleak tone was replaced with a more conventional showdown, in which Devereaux defeats S.E. Teach, decisively rescues those in danger, and strides into the final moments with clarity and strength. What had been conceived as a powerful tragic finale turned into a straightforward action victory redesigned squarely around the star's preferred image. Fact 15. Out for Justice 1991. The earliest drafts of Out for Justice offered a far darker examination of Detective Gino Felino's psyche. The script framed his pursuit of Richie Madineau as a descent into rage, where Felino's thirst for vengeance spirals beyond control. In the original ending, after violently confronting Richie, Felino faces internal investigation, hinting that his obsession may cost him his badge or even his freedom. It was intended to be a raw, unsettling finale that forced the audience to rethink their assumptions about the hero. Steven Seagal was not willing to portray the character that way. Seagal rejected the idea of Felino losing composure or facing consequences for his actions. According to production sources, he firmly insisted that the character remain morally righteous, no matter how intense the violence became. Any hint of misconduct or overreach was removed at his request. Felino needed to be someone who acted with complete justification, a figure above suspicion. This prompted a sweeping rewrite of the entire ending. The investigation subplot was eliminated. Scenes that suggested Felino's anger had become reckless were softened or cut entirely. Instead, the revised finale presents Felino as a controlled, justified force, delivering justice with precision. He kills Richie, receives no backlash, and returns to his life without facing any moral or legal reckoning. The film's psychological complexity was replaced with a straightforward, heroic victory, molded entirely to match the persona Seagal wanted to project. Bonus fact: the actor who demanded an untouched finale, one of the most unusual cases of an altered ending, comes from a production where the lead actor's request had nothing to do with storytelling, character arc, or emotional logic. The original final scene showed the hero staggering out of the last confrontation, bruised, bloodied, and visibly worn down, a rare moment of realism, meant to capture the physical toll of the violence he had endured. Makeup artists had prepared elaborate prosthetics, and the scene was ready to be shot as a gritty, grounded closing image. Then the star intervened with an unexpected demand. Crew members recall the actor insisting that the hero must appear completely unblemished in the final frame. No cuts, no bruises, no ripped clothing, not even a smudge of dirt. The request seemed so restrictive that the makeup department questioned whether they had heard correctly, especially since the entire climax had been choreographed to punish the character physically. But the actor remained adamant. The hero needed to stand tall and spotless, as if the brutal fight had barely touched him. The production was forced to rewrite and restage the ending. What was once a hard-hitting moment of vulnerability was replaced with a strangely pristine exit. Instead of limping away with the weight of the battle on his shoulders, the hero steps out looking invincible, delivering a calm, steady look before walking off as though nothing had happened. The shift dramatically altered the tone of the film's final seconds. A scene meant to humanize the character was replaced by an image crafted solely to preserve the star's personal brand, turning the ending into a surreal display of untouchable perfection. You've just seen how drastically these endings were reshaped, not by writers, not by studios, but by the stars themselves. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these altered finales shocked you the most? And which original version do you wish had survived the editing room? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your insights help uncover even deeper secrets behind the scenes. If hidden stories, lost endings, and untold truths are your thing, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. There are still countless secrets waiting to surface. Let's reveal them together.